One of the key principles or simple guidelines that we teach is the narrower your focus, the bigger your opportunity. One way in which that can be manifested is to be very clear about your primary target market or target markets. Ideally, you have a primary market, a secondary market, and a tertiary market. Your primary market will represent 60 to 65% of your revenue, your secondary market 20 to 25%, and your tertiary 10 to 15. Particularly so in your primary market, you want to become known in that market. And the more networking you do, the more your reputation will precede you. One way in which you can do that is attending industry events or events that are pertinent to your market. I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I went to a conference. Our primary focus is working with entrepreneurs. And this was a conference for entrepreneurs. And it started at 7:30 in the morning with a breakfast meeting. And I like to get there early and have a strategy for the meeting. There were about 700 attendees at this conference. And in typical fashion, the breakfast was set up as a buffet, and you went into a large room and there were tables. And there were 8 chairs per table. And I got my breakfast and I walked into the room and then surveyed the room. It was 7:30 in the morning, room is about 1/3 full. And I noticed there was one table where there was only one chair that was empty. And the other 7 chairs, the people were studiously eating their breakfast. They weren't interacting with each other. And what that said to me was that they were probably strangers. They didn't know each other. And as often is the case when people sit down, they focus on the breakfast in front of them. And so I went, and there was a woman sitting to my right, and I turned to her and said to her, is this chair free? And she said, yes. So I put my food down, and I leaned over and I put out my hand and said, hi, my name's Norm, and introduced myself. And she said, hi, I'm Janice. And then I went around the table and introduced myself to each of the people. I have a pretty good memory, and I also have a strategy for remembering people's names. So as I was introduced to each person, I shook their hand, put my other hand on it, and repeated their name. And in that way, I was anchoring each of their names. So when I came back to sit down, I knew the names of all of the other 7 people. And I turned to Janice beside me and said, Janice, tell me, what brings you to the conference? And she said, I'm a management consultant. I have my own business, and I'm here to learn, and I'm here to network. And then I went to David, the next person, and asked him what he did, and went all the way around the table. What was interesting was when each person said who they were and what they did, none of them gave me a compelling reason to ask, tell me more about that. They either described a label, I'm a management consultant, or they described a category. I'm a partner in a private equity firm. We focus on mid-cap companies, 20 to 100 million. This is an entrepreneurial conference. The people that we serve, some of them are here, so I'm here to learn and to network. When you differentiate yourself, you talk about what's important to people. So went all the way around the room, and then someone said, Norm, what brings you here? And I said, well, that interesting question, because I'm a bit of an outlier. Helping entrepreneurs like you thrive is at the core of everything we do. At my company, the Covenant Group, we help you design the business that is right for you, so you can leverage systems, processes, and approaches that drive revenue and measurable results. And David said to me, gee, I wish I'd met you 18 years ago when I started my business. And I said, David, that too is an interesting comment, because that's often what we hear. Most people think that when you're designing your business, you do so at the beginning of, or the start of your business. The reality, though, is that we are in a constant modality of designing. And our clients are actually typically not people who start out. They're people who are already very successful as entrepreneurs and want to take their business to the next level. In order to do so, they have to redefine performance. And that usually means some form of redesign and a new approach to systems, processes, and approaches. So we got into a 15-minute conversation about what that meant. The whole table was engaged. And at the end of the breakfast, I got 4 business cards. So one of the keys when you go to a networking event is you have to have a strategy for why you're there and what you're hoping to achieve. And then you have to employ specific tactics or techniques that draw people out, that create interest, that enable you to engage in a conversation about what's important to them that is relevant to what you do. And then how you differentiate yourself in the way in which you describe what you do, such that they say, that's really interesting, or I've never heard it explained quite that way. Tell me more. Strategy and tactics. Both of those are key to success when you attend an event. That's how you build your brand through event marketing.